make sure I got, yep, there we go, I got sound. Cool. So the thing I wanted to talk a little bit about today is surround sound. There's not a project associated with this. We're going to do some surround sound stuff next semester, but I figured this might be kind of an interesting thing for you to check out over break too. So, cool. So I'm going to jump right into it. There's a bunch going on here. I'm going to gloss over a bunch of things to make this an overview. Yeah, I think the last time I went through this, it was 2+ hours, so I'm going to gloss over some things, and we'll circle back around and hit some of these other interesting parts, but wanted to kind of give you a heads up on this kind of stuff. So, especially now with all this stuff being online, virtual reality VR stuff. Have you guys messed with VR stuff at all? Has anybody messed with VR stuff? Does anybody have like Google Glass, or not Google Glass, what do they call that? Google Cardboard? So Google Cardboard is a I got one of these at, where's my camera? I got one of these at Walmart. I think this was like under $10. Maybe because it was pink, whatever, I don't care. But this is how I double check my VR projects. You can get these pretty cheap. If you go online, they have something called Google Cardboard. It's basically a cardboard version of this, where you get it and then you fold it, and then, you know, it's a little set of VR glasses that hold your phone. This is something that's coming about a little bit more. I think, and it's going to become even more popular as we get out of COVID and there's going to be a little bit more of the working from home, homebody kind of thing. I can see this starting to get pushed a little bit. And there's some other reasons that I think this is actually going to stick this time, even though it hasn't in the past a couple times. But we'll get into that. So, even though all the VR projects that I'm working on and that I've done, honestly, what I do is I'll take a paying client that I like their project, and I'll offer to do a VR version of it, so that when it does start to happen, I've actually got a little bit of a portfolio for the projects. So I can kind of show you the stuff that I've been looking at. So this is more than just VR. I'm just going to talk a little bit about recording, because we're going to talk about that too. So let's start with the simplest version of a recording, and that would be one microphone, and it be played back through one speaker. So this would be a monophonic source. Mono means one, and phonic implies the production of sound. Stereophonic, or stereo, refers to a playback system with two speakers, left and a right. Note that the suffix phonic appears in both the possible playback devices. So you have a monophonic source or a stereophonic source. That's referring to your playback. That is referring to, I have either one speaker or I have two speakers. Sometimes I'll hear people say, oh, we hear in stereo. No, we don't hear in stereo. Stereo is a playback device. It's a source, it's not a destination, right? Our ears are a destination, not a source. So the thing that's giving us sound is either monophonic or stereophonic. And going all the way back to day one, our hearing is binaural, to oral being reception, and that would be receiving. So you can have binaural, you can also have monaural, which is basically when you have, you're only receiving sound through one ear. So technically, if you use your phone for a phone call and you put it up against your ear, that's a monaural source, because this ear doesn't hear what's coming out of the speaker. I don't need to grab my phone for an example. You know what a phone call looks like. So we need to think about this when we think about how we capture and then reproduce what we record. And we're gonna be doing a bunch of recording next semester. So when we first started recording in the 1800s, sound was captured through what was called a horn. Let me see if I can I'm going to take 1 second to see if I can find this. Perfect. I need a better picture than that. There we go. That's a great picture. There we go. This is what I want. Okay. So if I move this down here, I should be able to switch over here. There we go. So this thing over here on the right is a Victrola, which is an old style record player. And the way it worked is that you had a needle on an arm and it would read the grooves and the vibrations would be amplified by that horn. Now the thing you've all probably seen this before, but the thing that people don't talk about as much is that they used pretty much the exact same technology to record at the time. People would sit in front of a horn and they would sing or play into it, and the record, instead of being shellac or vinyl or plastic or whatever, well, it was shellac back then, would have been a wax disc, and it would have been digging those grooves. Instead of playing those grooves, it would have been digging those grooves. And then basically you take it from a soft surface that responds to the needle vibrating, and then you put it on a hard surface that causes the needle to vibrate, and then a speaker ends up being the horn ends up being the microphone and the speaker, really. So this same concept still is in play today. You can actually use a pair of headphones for a microphone. And technically you could use a microphone as a speaker, but you would probably blow it up before it did anything reasonable. So, oh, give me 1 second. Okay, so of course in the 20s we finally started replacing Victrolas with actual microphones, and then microphones had direction. Well, horns had a directional issue. If you weren't standing right in front of that horn, you weren't on the recording. You'll find a lot of pictures. I'm not going to go digging for one right now, but there's a lot of pictures where you see like an entire jazz band or whatever, just shoulder to shoulder, everybody trying to get directly in front of this horn so that they can all be heard. But when microphones came out, you had the option of the pattern being a bit wider. And we've talked about polar patterns before. We talked about microphones and polar patterns, yes? So we talked about cardioid and omni. So yeah, I can skip over all that stuff and figure eight and all that kind of stuff. So one of the things that this allowed us to do is it allowed us to start making stereo pairs. And I actually have this, I found this great app, and it is free. It is called Mars, M-A-R-R-S. I don't know if I showed you guys this before, but this app is really cool. So it's called Mars. It's free, and it's for, I know I have it on my iPad and my iPhone. I'm sure it probably comes on it's probably on Android and other platforms too. But the cool thing about this is that you can tell it a stereo pattern, and it will show you how it's set up, and it will also show you how it receives sound. So right now I'm looking at an XY pattern over there on the right. And the thing about this is that if you look directly below, you'll see the representation of two speakers. And what this is telling you is, based on this mic pattern, how these four items will show up in the speakers. So if I move the third one, you can see where it would show up in, and you look on the bottom, you can see where it will show up in the stereo spread. It's actually really interesting. This is a whole nother discussion, but we can go into things like bloom line, and of course things get more spread out because of the way that the mics work. AB, which is basically two omnidirectional microphones pointing kind of distant from each other. I can actually increase the spacing, and you can see how the stereo image widens. Let's see what else is in here. ORTF, NOS, we'll get more in depth with that. Faulkner is actually a new one I didn't realize, where you use two ribbons side by side. So it's really interesting to show you how these different stereo patterns will affect the way that it actually picks up the things in front of it. Now, this is a crucial thing to start understanding, and we will spend a lot more time talking about this stuff. But you want to have a basic understanding of this, because when we start looking at surround sound, these stereo patterns are the basis for a lot of the surround sound recording setups that can be done. So, which we should be able to play with that a little bit next semester too. Hopefully, that should be cool. So you have a bunch of different stereo options that you can use to record the back versus the front and all those kind of things. We'll talk more about that later. So in music, for the most part, music stayed pretty much mono for a long time. Like the entire Beatles catalog was mono until the only Beatles record that was specifically mixed for stereo and doesn't have a mono version is the last one. So, which is Abbey Road. All the other ones were mono. There were stereo versions, but they were stereo at that time was like VR is now. It was kind of out there, but not that many people had the gear to do it, so nobody really paid much attention to it, but they still did it. There's enough of a market that they could do it, but not enough for it to really completely take off yet. But with music sticking with mono, the film industry was actually the industry that actually took things by the reins and started kicking out different options here. And movies only started using sound in 1927. And they basically had theaters that were just a single speaker behind the screen so that you could hear the sound. But in 1940, which is so you got less than 15 years after they first started using sound, they already started in 1940. They started messing around with surround options, and it was Disney's Fantasia. So the interesting thing about Disney's Fantasia is that instead of going mono, they didn't just go stereo. They actually went into what they referred to as a surround sound system. Well, actually, they referred to it as the Fanta sound system in connection with Fantasia. And it had a left, right, center speaker, and then it had one single speaker in the back. So, excuse me. So it had one... it was very much like the earliest surround sound. And this was 1940. If you were a theater that wanted to play Fantasia, they had to come out and install a specific system in your theater, and you had to be certified. Like, only certain people could play Fantasia at the time. And it was really successful. It went really well. And then December 7th, 1941 happened. If you've had any history classes whatsoever, you know that the U.S. ended up getting pulled into World War II. Materials became, we were still coming out of a depression. The materials came scarce. They basically started scrapping sound systems for parts. And for a very short time, Fantasia was presented in mono. And then Disney said, if you're going to present it in mono, we don't even want to show it. So all those systems got taken apart. None of them exist today. And things went right back to being mono for a while. So it went until the 50s where we started becoming we started actually getting at least back to stereo in movie theaters. So we got to stereo even though the movies were still being mixed in mono. But obviously once that became a standard, the industry started picking up on that and movies started becoming stereo. And then in the 50s, we also had something called a Decca tree. Now, a Decca tree, I'm going to need to draw a picture here. Actually, no, I don't. It's pretty easy to explain. A Decca tree is 3 omnidirectional microphones in a triangle, basically. And it would be a triangle pointing at the orchestra. So imagine that you make a triangle with 3 omnidirectional microphones. Spread your arms out and put a microphone on each end. That's where the first 2 are. And then put your arm forward, and that's where the third one is. The only other difference is that the one in the front is actually a couple feet lower, like a foot or so lower than the other 2. So you have a triangle that's been tilted downward towards the orchestra, basically. It got its name because at the time, to be able to get the microphones in that position, one of the engineers commented that it looked like a Christmas tree. So it got referred to as the Decca tree, and it was figured out by the record label Decca at their studios. For many years, nobody knew how to do this because back then, the sound of your record label's recordings were were thought of as a trademark. The Decca studios were a few blocks down the road from Abbey Road in London. So those guys knew each other. They used to apparently there was some friendly rivalry, but in the same way that EMI which is Abbey Road, EMI was kind of keeping their secrets to themselves, so was Decca, and this was their little trick that ended up being an industry standard. Now, the one thing that's interesting about a Decca tree is that a lot of people say, well, it's just 3 omnidirectional microphones pointing towards an orchestra. Yes, but technically, it's not exactly 3 feet. It's not exactly 3 omnis. It's 3 very specific omnis. Specifically, it's the Neumann M50. When you put it in omnidirectional mode, a certain part of the upper register stays directional. So some of the very highs would still stay directional, even though the rest of the microphone pickup would be omnidirectional. So you get a very specific sound if you use the exact mics that were in a Decca tree. If you use normal omnis, they pick up every frequency from every direction. It's not exactly the same thing as a true Decca tree, but just a little side note there. So in 57, it wasn't until 1957 that the first stereo record was made. And the first stereo record was basically a demo disc. It had things like a train going by you, and I think it had like a clock or something. It had like just a bunch of random, like gimmicky kind of stereo effects on it. I need to try to see if I can find that record. I wonder if it's on Spotify. It might be. I'll have to look for it. 1957's stereo demo recording. Do a search on Spotify, see if there is one, maybe. So, we're at 1957, and stereo started becoming more common through the 60s. Like I said, the Beatles really didn't do much until the end of the 60s, so you still had about 10 years of mono turning into stereo. But even despite that, there's a guy named Peter Scheiber that was already starting to talk about how to get multi-channel audio onto a two-channel format. Basically what they do is they offset the phase of the extra channels, and then there's a way to decode it later. Honestly, it's a bunch of math that I don't completely get, but I know it works. Basically, that's the general concept of how you get Dolby Theater sound from a DVD or a Blu-ray, or well, these days they do actually transmit. They do broadcast in actual discrete multi-channel sound, but a lot of the stuff, like a lot of Netflix stuff, is Dolby Surround formatted, and it's basically 2 channels that can be extrapolated with a decoder. So, then in 1971, a guy named Michael Gerzon started experimenting with some ideas. Michael Gerzon actually is kind of an unsung hero for audio. We have the Waves, the Q10 EQ and the Renaissance EQ. A lot of the curves, and actually there's a bunch of early Waves plugins that owe their design to a lot of his research. But nobody really hears about him because, unfortunately, like many other tragic figures, he was bipolar. He was antisocial. He would have gotten a lot further if he could get along with people better. Let's just put it that way. But he was kind of a mad genius kind of thing. What he figured out is that if you're going to do surround sound, you can take a left and right stereo recording, and what you can do is you can take the left and right. So his plan was you take 4 speakers, the left and right go directly to your left and right. There's a front and there's a back. So there's 4 total speakers in a cross, if you want to think of it that way. The middle speaker gets its sound by combining the left and right in phase, into the middle speaker. So you still have your stereo left and right, but you have a strong center image because everything shows up in the middle. The rear one takes the left and right, but inverts the phase on one of the two channels and combines the two. And if you remember that example I played for you guys at the beginning of the semester, that cancels out a lot of things and tends to leave, what it leaves are things that are not common to both channels, which tend to be reverb, ambience, things that are panned left and right, and that kind of thing. So in practice, this actually worked really well because you had a very strong center image in the front and it drew your attention to you, and it canceled out things in the back, and what you were left with was ambience. But if you think about it, if you're sitting in an auditorium, what's behind you is ambience, right? So it gave you a very realistic version of the recording you were playing back. Now, he was mostly using classical recordings, so if you're using a pop recording and something is panned hard left and hard right, then you're going to start having weird things showing up in the back. He's talking about, he was using stereo classical recordings that wouldn't have that extreme directionality, so this system worked out a little bit better. I have yet to actually get a chance to try this. He said that some pop recordings still came out pretty good, but I can't vouch for that until I actually get a chance to hear this. So, so he figured out how to do this, but around the same time, CBS, the record label CBS, had taken Scheiber's work and done what they called the stereo quadraphonic system, except instead of the way Gerson was doing it, instead of it being a cross, it was an X, and you would have your left, right, and then you would have a left, right in the rear. So you basically had front, left, right, and surround left, right, which theoretically could have worked pretty well, but Gerson actually found a flaw in the way that they were encoding it that kind of screwed it up and compromised the stereo image. And apparently he went to an early demo of the CBS system, and he approached the designer and was not very political about it. He was pretty rude to the guy that came up with CBS's version. So instead of saying, hey, I'd like to work with you, some people say theoretically I think he was, I can't remember if he was actually, I think they were actually considering hiring him. Like he could potentially have worked for CBS, but he pissed so many people off at that demo that they were like, nope, don't want him, don't want to talk to him, ignore him. So unfortunately his anti-socialness screwed himself over professionally, which apparently happened multiple times. So CBS tried to do that, and it failed commercially. They released it in 1970. It only lasted until 76, and it just had so many technical problems and compatibility issues, and all those kind of things. People were just like, this doesn't really work that well. I'm not going to spend my money on stuff that barely works, so screw it, we're not going to buy it. Part of Gerson's argument was also that all four encoded channels were used to feed the four speakers. They were basically, it would encode four channels onto a vinyl disc, onto a record, and then they would spit it out and it would just go to four speakers. And his argument was, yeah, you can do that. Well, first off, part of his argument was you guys aren't doing that. You guys aren't even doing that correctly. There was some kind of issue with the, it's a technical issue. There was a technical issue. Let's just leave it at that. But what he said is, wait a minute, if you use my method, you can encode all the information you need with 3 channels, and it would leave the fourth channel to actually pick up height, right? Because normal surround sound deals with everything around you in a horizontal circle. It doesn't deal with anything above or below you. So he said, if you do it my way, you can encode it in a complete 360-degree audio, because 3 channels would do the horizontal plane and 1 channel would do the vertical plane. And this ends up being really crucial to us when we start getting into VR. So Gerson actually ended up using, you're going to excuse me, I'm going to have to flounder a little bit on screen here. Oops. Oh, there it is. Grab this back real quick. Do a quick search here. Forgot to pull this up. So there was a company named Calrec that came up with what was called the sound field microphone. Now, these things are not cheap. I'm trying to find a really good... Oh, this is a great picture. Let's see. But they were the first of their kind, and many years ago, I actually got to... oh, wow. They're really... Oh, this is perfect. Okay. So, grab this. Okay, so this is the Calrec sound field. Now, they're not cheap, like I said, but he is selling 2 microphones, so that's not as bad as it could be. But what you can kind of see in this picture right here is that there's a really strange way that they organize the capsule. So, you can kind of see it there a little bit better. I know where there's a better picture. I'll go back to that here in a second. But the cool thing about the... Oh, you can really kind of see it here. So it's what's called a tetrahedral array. And basically you have a left microphone that points downward and a right microphone that points upward on the front and the opposite in the back. So they're really pointing in all these different directions. Now, what you can do is you plug it into the box that you see behind the microphone there, and that box decodes the information from the microphone, from those capsules. The cool thing about this, I knew somebody that had one, and I got to borrow it once, and it was really cool. You plug headphones into that box, and you could record all 4 channels separately and do this stuff later, but what you can do is you plug it into that box, and with that box actually gives you the ability to put on headphones and take the stereo image and move it literally wherever you wanted to. You could pan it left to right, you could move it up and down, you could pinpoint, you could decide the stereo pattern, you could decide the pickup pattern and the direction of the microphone, of the recording, after the fact. It was really cool that you could do that. It wasn't specifically used for surround sound until many years later. See if there's anything else in here interesting. Yeah, there was a newer, smaller version. But see, here you go. You've got this multi-pin connection to plug the microphone in, and then you would have you'd have 4 XLR outs to record each one individually. Ah, there's a really much better picture of that, but there's a even better example. That's just the box there. Let's go back. Have to forgive me. Have to forgive me. I'm working on a very small screen that you can't see. Okay, so there we go. That is what the tetrahedral array looks like. Meh. So there you go. That's what I was talking about. It points up to the right, down to the left, etc., etc., and it picks up those 4 things. Now, Gerson started using this microphone, and actually he helped design this microphone. This microphone, this whole alignment thing was his idea. So he figured it out because the thing I actually skipped over here is that he actually tried to do playback with 4 speakers one in the upper right corner, one on the floor and the left side, and then the opposite on the back. And he could decode it, and he said it worked really well. It was just obviously very expensive and very difficult to set speakers up in such a way. But they extrapolated that and started making this microphone, and now this microphone can pick up in 360 degrees, which is really, really freaking cool. So around this time, you've also got the movie industry getting back into their thing and getting into the 5.1 surround format. And 5.1 became a standard for surround. It's what we can do in the studio. And the way that they named it became a standard too. So as you probably realize, 5.1 refers to 5 speakers surrounding you and 1 subwoofer. So when you see a 0.1, it's however many subwoofers you have. So if you add a second subwoofer to your 5.1 system, you've turned it into a 5.2 system. So a 7.1 system means that you have left, right, center, left surround, right surround, and then you have 2 left and right directly to your left and right, like straight out from your ears. And then 7.1, it means you have 1 sub. 7.2 would be a second sub.
I've seen like a third digit in that number thing. What does that third digit do?
That is, we're getting to that. That's Atmos. The third digit has been added for Atmos. Yeah, and the numbers start getting really insane here real quick. So before we get to that, in 2000, with theaters, with home theaters becoming a thing, in 2000, the music industry started trying to do surround sound music. And it was interesting, but unfortunately, they really didn't push it very hard. So I remember at Best Buy, this was 20 years ago, that they had a surround sound section for music, and literally I could encompass the entire selection with holding my arms out. That was it. In the size of a Best Buy, that was the extent of their 5.1 selection, and it wasn't great. I bought about a dozen things. I've actually got some really cool ones. I've got a great surround mix of Goodbye Yellow Brick Road from Elton John. There's a great surround mix of Dark Side of the Moon. I've got a 5.1 mix of Peter Gabriel's Up, Norah Jones's first record, the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds, which is a really interesting surround mix. A couple other ones. But it was really cool, but 2 things happened. First off, there were 2 competing standards. There was DVD-A and, gotta even remember the other one. DVD-A and, I can't remember what the other one was, but there were 2 competing things, and you had to buy a separate player for each format, and then the industry didn't put out that many titles. So between those 2 things, people were just like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it for me to set up all this crap to own like 3 records that I can play. I'm not going to buy into this. So by 2007, that was dead. So the first 2 times that the industries tried to do surround sound mixes, it died within 6 or 7 years. It just never happened. They actually considered it extinct by 2007, and it went downhill pretty quickly. It only lasted 3 or 4 years before the hype wore off, and it just started. I could see the writing on the wall very early in the process, unfortunately. I still have a player to this day, and it's still pretty cool. But then we get to 2010. If surround sound music would have lasted another 3 years, it might still be around now. But this brings us to 2010, and that's when VR started. So you started having VR, and it started out as a gimmick, but the thing about it is that right away, gaming picked up on VR. And that is the thing that kept it in the public's eye. So audio technology went, oh crap, now you're talking about actually being 360 degrees. Even 5.1 can't cover that. How do we deal with this? So now we start getting to Atmos. So in 2012, a format called Atmos became an industry standard, but it didn't start becoming a thing for the public for a while, for a couple reasons, and they finally did it right the third time. So Atmos took the standard 7.1 format and advocated all the stuff that Gerson had been advocating for, which was height information. So a typical Atmos system is referred to as 7.1.4. This is what you were talking about. So the additional 0.4 means that in an Atmos system, you have 7 surround speakers, left, right, center, left surround, right surround, far left, far right, subwoofer, and then you have 4 speakers above your head on the ceiling. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have a front and back, left and right, 4 speakers on the ceiling shooting downward at you. So that's where you start getting your 0.4. Now, the additional point is the name, how many speakers are used above the listener. You may hear the same system being referred to as 11.1, where they just combine everything above you and then leave the subs together. But most of the time they are breaking it down into 7.1.4. But here's the real cool thing. So an Atmos system is scalable. So the smallest system, the smallest basic system that they recommend, the smallest professional system, let's put it that way, is the 7.1.4. Hold on. Give me one quick second. Okay, so it's 7.1.4, and this can be played back. One second. Okay, so 7.1.4, 11.1. So an Atmos system is scalable. So your main recording may be 7.1.4, but an Atmos system can actually accommodate up to 64 separate speakers in a cinema and up to 22 speakers in a house. So the thing that makes Atmos such a big deal is that Atmos is not like traditional surround sound. So the Atmos, the first thing is what they refer to as a bed track. These are the things that when I do a surround mix, I decide where things go left and right. And if I want something on the left, it specifically ends up in the left speaker. It will always come out of the left speaker. Put it in the right speaker, it will always come out of the right speaker. Those things don't change. But there's something else that Atmos adds, and it's called an object. So what an object is I can say that I'm doing surround sound for a Batman movie, and I want the Batmobile to go from behind me on the right to in front of me on the left. I want it to go, or the Batwing or whatever the plane was called. I want it to go above my head and go straight from the back corner to the front corner. So the issue with that is that the issue with surround sound systems started becoming that not everybody set them up correctly, and not everybody was willing to spend the money to buy all the speakers and set them up the way that they were intended. Atmos allows you to buy however many speakers you can accommodate and afford, and you tell a receiver what speakers you have and where they are. And the Atmos receiver will decode the object information and make it play back correctly on any system. So you don't have to have the speakers in the right spot. It basically says, oh, you only have 5 speakers and one of them's in a weird spot. Well, that's fine. I can calculate the issue, and I will still hear the Batmobile going from one corner to the other exactly the way that it was intended to be. Whereas if you take a 5.1 system and somebody puts their surrounds in the wrong place, which I have seen many times, then suddenly the Batmobile doesn't go from the back corner to the front corner. It goes from your side to the front corner because the speaker was in the wrong place. But Atmos takes care of that. Atmos says, I don't care what you have, just tell me where you put it, and I'll make it sound as close as it possibly can to the original mixing engineer's intention. So that's the really cool part about this. So You do have to have the dedicated decoder. It solves the old problem that that you don't have to be subject to the end user setting up your equipment wrong. Now, as Atmos has grown in popularity, the music industry has realized they need to look towards releasing music in this format. Avid announced Atmos integration in 2017. The basic version does not have Atmos integration, but the Pro Tools Ultimate does. Reaper allows for it, and there's only like 2 other programs that can allow for it. Most DAWs don't handle Atmos right now. Actually, I don't know that Pro Tools might be the only thing that handles Atmos. Pro Tools and Nuendo, I think, are the only things that handle Atmos. There's other things that I'm sorry, what I was thinking of is Pro Tools, Reaper, and shoot, there's one, Pyramix, and there's 1 or 2 others that handle ambisonics. But Atmos is only dealt with I think it's Nuendo and Pro Tools right now are the only 2 that you can mix Atmos on. So another reason that people complain about Atmos or Pro Tools, but can't do Atmos on Reaper, so knock yourself out. Anyway, the big thing about Atmos that the industry got right this time is that they've been waiting for it. They didn't just jump out and throw everything out there and hope it stuck. They've been actively building catalogs. So first off, you don't have to really make a huge investment. You can have literally anything from a sound bar under your TV to a giant 22 speakers channel system in your home, and you can play back Atmos content. Meanwhile, CBS Records dedicated one of their entire studios to Atmos mixing, and many other record labels started doing that. The other thing, and I haven't heard much movement on this, but, and I may have mentioned this, Bob Clearmountain, the guy that I've mentioned before that's a professional engineer, ever since the late 80s, he has been making surround sound mixes of every record he has ever mixed. He has a way on his console that when he's done doing his stereo mixes, he just splits sources up into 5 speakers and then bounces it as a surround mix. So even though no one has ever heard it, there are surround mixes for Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA, David Bowie's Let's Dance, like all of those famous 80s records. There are surround sound versions. They exist. They're sitting in Bob Clearmountain's archives. They've just never been released. So, you know, he's incredibly smart because as soon as it takes off and he goes forth and says, "Hey, I've already got all these mixes," you know, he's going to be the Jeff Bezos of music once they have to pay him for all of those surround mixes that he did 30 years ago. So, but meanwhile, all these industries have also been taking new content and they have been mixing like hell. So when Atmos actually gets a strong push into the consumer market, there's going to be a huge catalog of music that you can pick from. So the buy-in's not as expensive as it used to be, and the catalog is going to be way bigger than it ever was before. So there's a much better chance of Atmos sticking more than any other surround format in the past ever has, simply because it's easy to get into and there's a lot of selection. The 2 things that the music industry did not do when they were trying to do it the first time in the 60s and the 90s. So from there, this actually gets even crazier. So in the big systems, they'll do what's called a height surround. So let's say we've got our normal 7.1 surround system, okay? 7.1, and we have our 4 above. A lot of Atmos systems, and actually Atmos systems that you see in movie theaters, a lot of them do this. There is a second set of 7.1 speakers above the first set. So they have height surrounds. So instead of this is 7.1, you actually have 7.1 with another 7 on top of the first 7. And then you have the ones that are shooting straight down. So you can end up with this huge, insane system. The Japanese broadcaster NHK is now the biggest proponent of sending multi-channel audio. They are currently broadcasting in 22.2 only in Japan. So you have to be there to basically see it. And there's a research format that maxes out at 80 channels right now. There's actually a version of doing Atmos. Basically, it's an Atmos setup where you sit inside of a circle, and there's, I don't want to say it's like 60 or 70 small speakers around this globe, and you sit in the middle, and literally sound comes at you from every direction. It's phenomenal. If you ever get a chance to see one of these Atmos demos, go. I got to do one in Nashville a couple years ago, and they had the 5.1 around us. They had a 5.1 height system. They had 8 speakers going across the ceiling in the back, and they had a subwoofer in every corner. And if you closed your eyes, you would. There's like a rainforest one, as you can expect, and when they do the rain sound effect and you can hear the bee buzzing around your head. It's phenomenal. It sounds incredible. It's just really cool. So it's a really promising format. So this is all well and good, and we've got multiple speakers and we've got all this content and stuff, but the reality is that a lot of people still listen to stuff in headphones. So how do we get all of this content into headphones? That's where you start getting into ambisonics. So ambisonics basically takes, again, that sound field microphone I showed you before, and then gives you the ability to, let me switch over and do one quick thing here. Gives you that ambisonic stuff, and it basically encodes sound with the same principle, basically, but breaks it into 4 channels for Pro Tools to handle, and then you can organize it from there. So if I go in here, I'm not going to play this for you online, but if you go to Waves and you look up the B360 encoder, they have a bunch of information about ambisonics. So ambisonics uses what's called B format, and basically B format remembers the information from in front and behind, left and right, up and down, and then just basically an omnidirectional one in the middle that picks up all the low end and the general space from everywhere else. There's an A format and a B format. It's confusing. I'm not going to get into that, but B format is kind of the industry standard. So if you get into this, you want to pay attention to what format you get it in. If you go to the Waves website, and again, I'm not going to play this through a Google Meet because it'll sound like crap and you definitely won't get the experience. Go to the Waves sites and watch this video, which is Marcella Areca, who has done a lot of great recordings. She did a surround mix or VR mix for a client, and I believe if you scroll down on the page, I think it's in the, if I recall correctly, it's in the
My name is Marcella Areca, better known as Miss Lago to many of you.
Okay, so again, I'm not going to play the whole video for you guys, but if you scroll down into the description, there is a link to the video for the song that she did the VR version for. And it's pretty cool. You can follow the singer around the room, and it's pretty cool. Now, to do that, there's 2 things about ambisonic mixes that you need to be aware of. The first thing is, if you're going to watch them online, you got to use Chrome because unfortunately, Safari doesn't work. So you can't do it with Safari. Let me look this up real quick. So let me find some of the stuff for you. And if it's easier, I'm just gonna send you. Well, let me just do this. Okay, I'm going to drop a bunch of stuff in the chat here. So if you want it, there's the link to the Waves page. If you want to skip all of that.
My name is Marcella Areca.
This is the direct link to the video he did. Again, you got to watch all of this in Chrome. The other thing about this is that... Oh, wait, no, it's not there. It's in my YouTube account. Let me give you a couple other links to some things that I did messing around with it. The first one I did is that there is... Oops, I'm on the wrong account. Let me switch back to my right. Nope, wrong account still. I got too many YouTube accounts. There it is. Okay, this is actually a video that I did for the Westerville Concert Band. The Westerville Concert Band did a piece for Labor Day where they wanted to have, if we had had an in-person concert, they were going to have what they referred to as a antiphonal brass section, which basically means that the brass players would have been behind the crowd playing back. So in my surround version, you have the normal mix up front with the narrator, and then in the rear, the brass section is actually behind you. So you actually have to turn your head or rotate the screen to hear the brass section. If you don't, you kind of get this ghostly version of the brass section, which is also kind of part of the point. So that was kind of a fun thing to do with that. And I actually made... I just got to find it. I actually did a rough mix for a friend of mine for their band, but it's not on this YouTube account. I can't remember what YouTube account it's on. I know I've got it here somewhere. Give me 1 second. I think I know where it might be. And it's probably one of them. It's probably a little bit more along the lines of what you'd be interested in doing than the concert band is. Ah, there it is. Great, found it. Okay, this is from a local group called Honey and Blue. That's my surround mix of their tune. The one above that is the Westerville Concert Band. The one above that is the Waves stuff, and then the Waves video. Let me also jump back here. Over here. And there's something else I wanted to send you guys that you guys can watch on your own. I'm not going to try to play it again through Google because it'll look like crap. But if I send you the link, you can check it out yourself. There is... This is it right here. So I had an ambisonic mic for a little bit. I'm going to get one again. But but I didn't really need it during quarantine, so I got rid of that. But this thing is, let me switch. Again, let me, sorry, jumping between two computers here. I'm trying to see this. I'm trying to sharpshoot here. Okay, so this is a product review I did when I had the microphone. And again, I'll let you watch it on your own, but the thing about this is that it shows you, it talks a little bit about the microphone, it talks a little bit about how it works. I actually go into a little bit of detail about how there's a plug-in that comes with the microphone. So you record the 4 channels, but then you can decode everything after the fact. So like, just a real quick version here, you can make it stereo. When you play back the tracks, this blue area shows you where the sound is coming from, and you can actually rotate the head that you see in the thing. You can go up and down and left and right, so you can change what you were looking at the time. You can actually, it goes through, I go through and actually play. This is very noticeable. I play back tracks as I'm changing the pattern and I'm changing the angle, so you can hear the difference if you're hearing headphones. You can actually extrapolate the Ambisonics microphone into 5.1 and change the polar pattern on each microphone. It's actually really, really freaking cool. But if you keep going, yeah, you can see right there where I'm basically giving you, I'm running through a bunch of examples. But when you go to the end, I did this thing where I had her play a track, play a song she was working on, and then as she played, I rotated the camera, and then I also matched the sound of the microphone to rotate along with the video, so you can get an idea of what the microphone actually picks up as you listen to it from the back or the front. It's really the most noticeable right here.
Think I'm falling. You have come and now the gate is changed. Finally, indifferent.
And you can hear her changing left and right in the stereo image, obviously, as it rotates. So you can get an idea of what the microphone actually picks up. So if you watch that, there's a bunch of listening examples to see what you can do with all this fun stuff. It's really, really cool to play with. What I've been trying to do, there is a way, even though we don't have Ultimate at school, there is a way that you can kind of fake surround sound. And there's also ways that you can basically mix, we'll talk about this next semester. You can mix your project in 5.1 and then have it encoded for VR. So even though we don't necessarily have the setup to do a true VR look up, look down, which to be honest, they don't put musicians on the ceiling, so that's a small price to pay. There are ways that we can do in the studio a 5.1 mix and then extrapolate that to a VR mix. So again, like right now, I'll be quite honest, no one has paid me to do a VR mix yet, but everyone I've done one for has been really impressed. Oh, I take that back. No. I did get paid for a set of VR mixes. But the point here is that I'm trying to get a portfolio built on it so that when it does become a thing, I've already got a head start on it. Because when it does become a thing and people start asking, you don't want to be like, yeah, I think I can do it, right? It's much better to be, yeah, I've done a dozen of these already, and here's the link, and let's do this, right? So that, I think, is the value of keeping your eye out of what's going on with this kind of stuff and keeping an eye on the developments that happen and what's going on in the industry as far as ambisonics is concerned. So ambisonics and surround sound is something you definitely want to keep an eye on. Do a Google search. There's lots of stuff out there. A lot of it's kind of gimmicky, but there's some cool stuff out there if you look around. Just remember, you got to use Chrome. Safari doesn't let you do it. Well, here's the weird thing. Safari on your computer will not do ambisonics. But if you download, I think there's an app called Free VR Player. If you download that, you can do VR on your phone if you have that additional app set up to basically be an add-on to Safari. So I can check my mixes on a phone by plugging my earbuds into my iPhone, putting it up on my YouTube account, and then opening that YouTube video, and then using my phone with a set of earbuds and that plug-in. I can monitor on my phone, but you can't do it on the desktop. It's kind of a weird quirk. But if you're using Chrome, it totally works fine. You also, I didn't say this, if you don't realize this, you don't have to have the glasses and you don't have to have headphones on necessarily. If you're in Chrome and you watch a VR video, you can actually use your pointer to grab the screen and rotate the picture in any direction, and the audio will follow. So your stereo playback will still be giving you what you would have heard in your earbuds. So you don't have to buy all the gear to check out VR stuff. You can totally just navigate around it with your mouse and pointer, basically. Okay. Whew. Okay. Skipped over some stuff there, but that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Is there any questions, or is that just completely confusing the hell out of everybody? Make sense? Cool. So, like I said, check this stuff out. Just be aware of it. Especially if, well, here's the other thing about it is that, ironically, the film industry is what got us into 5.1, but the film industry is a little bit hesitant. They're using Atmos, but they're hesitant a little bit with VR, because if you've ever shot any film, the problem with VR is you can't hide anything. And I'm sure you've all seen behind the scenes thing at a movie on a movie set. They have all sorts of stuff in front of the camera, and then there's lights and tents and the sound guys in the corner, and there's all this technical crap going on the other side of the camera. The problem with VR is you can't hide anything. So the film industry is kind of like, how do we use VR? Because we can't hide all of our equipment. And also, the whole point of movie making is that narratively, you want to direct somebody to look at, you want to tell them what to look at. If I give you VR, how do I know you're not going to wander off and look, be looking at the ceiling for the whole scene and miss something in the movie? So, ironically, VR has not really been adapted in big part by the film industry, even though they're the ones that push surround sound. They're doing the Atmos thing, but they're not necessarily doing the VR thing. Music is taking advantage of that, because music doesn't mind doing some weird things like flying the vocal around so that you have to follow it, kind of thing. That experimental stuff is a little bit more in the music realm than it is in the video realm right now. Yeah, there's a good friend of mine that just laments that all the time. He's like, VR's cool, but I can't do anything with it. I can't. It's useless to me because I can't hide anything. I can't hide my lights. I can't hide the catering truck or the dressing room. It's like I can't. Everything's out in the open. So how do you make that work? So, but that's a whole different thing there. So, if you're interested a little bit more in just checking this guy out, Michael Gerson, phenomenal. I mean, just amazing what he was able to do. Really interesting there. Oh, there's one other thing that I'm going to leave you with here. And it's this. One more link here. And it's not a link. It's something to check out on Spotify. Cowboy Junkies' 1988 album, The Trinity Sessions. Let me see if I can find a quick picture for that. Because what they did was really freaking cool. So if you... Oh, there's my mouse. Oh, that's why. I'm still on YouTube. That's why I have a black screen. Okay. So... I can't see, so I'm hoping I spelled all that right. Yeah, Cowboy Junkies. There we go. That's the picture I'm looking for. Let's see if I can see this. Come on, I told it to do that. Oh well, it's not doing it. Anyway, so if you look closely at this black and white picture over here on the right, this entire record was recorded basically with 2 microphones. They put the sound field microphone in the middle of the room, and they recorded this at a church, where the Trinity sessions come from. It's the Trinity Church in Nashville. The band was set up all around it, and that speaker that you see on the far right is the singer. She was in a different room with headphones with a separate microphone, actually another sound field microphone, pumped into that speaker, and then fed into the, and then the speaker was aimed specifically at the sound field microphone. If you listen to that record, the thing to know, listen, and go, when we finish up, just real quick, go on Spotify and listen to it. And you got to remember this. 1 microphone, everybody's sitting around it, and the singer is singing through a speaker. The microphone was recorded in stereo. 2 tracks, directly to 2 tracks, hardly any processing, no mixing. The vocal was not separated. It was recorded on a 2-track DAT machine, recorded direct to digital in stereo. What you hear is exactly as the session happened, with a little bit of EQ and compression and mastering. Knowing that, it sounds like a studio record. It sounds like they mic'd everything, but they didn't. It's all 2 mics. And it would have been 1 mic if they would have been able to figure out how to get the singer in the room with them. So check that record out. It's, I mean, even if you don't like the music, just listen to a minute of it and be like, holy crap, this is 1 mic and it sounds like a studio recording. It's freaking amazing. So, yeah, so it's on Spotify. I've checked it out on Spotify more than once, so. Cool. Well, that's all I got for you guys. So I will be seeing you guys next semester. And make sure you guys get me all your stuff by Thanksgiving, and I will be around if you need anything else.
So we do not have class on Tuesday?
Do you, in that finals week?
No, this coming Tuesday.
Oh, so you guys are having a full day, a full week, and then you're having finals after Thanksgiving?
So we have up until like Wednesday, I think. Wednesday of next week is our last actual class. And then we have Thanksgiving, and then everyone goes home for finals week.
Oh. I thought it was, oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Grooveview is doing the opposite. Well, we're done, and then finals week is the week of Thanksgiving. Let me think. Okay, in that case, let's do this. So next Tuesday, what I'd like to do is I'd like to see, I'd like to do a check-in. Everybody email me, and I will send out an email here a little bit later. Let's do this with Tuesday then. I'm going to give you even more time. So have your stuff in by Monday of finals week. So you get tons of time to get all this stuff done. Plenty of time to make use of the facilities. The thing I would like to do is let's just get together, and I want to see where everybody's... I'd just like to see what works in progress you guys have. I'd like to see where you're at, maybe with the Foley project, or where you're at with the budget thing. Does that make sense? So let's do that. So let's plan to meet next Tuesday, but it's kind of a work day. I won't have a lecture prepared. It'll just be kind of chatting. And let's do that. Let's brainstorm a little bit about how to make next semester work, so that I'm not just coming up with it all on my own. So have you guys already done your scheduling for next semester and everything? Okay, so yeah, let's do that. Let's do that Tuesday. Let's figure out our plan of attack. Because there's a bunch of stuff I want to do, and I'm not completely sure how to make it happen. So we can talk about that and figure out how to make the most use, assuming a plan A for if we're still stuck like this, or a plan B if we do get to do some in-person stuff, and how we can accommodate as much of that stuff as possible in the situation we're in. Cool. Cool. Then I will see you guys Tuesday. Take your time, stay safe, do what you can on your stuff, and I will see you guys next Tuesday.
See ya.
Later.